I'd like to spend this video reading aloud rate your music reviews for Jay-Z's The Blueprint, uploaded between 2002 and 2005. I find it fascinating this is kind of an interesting flashback into what it was like when this album was more, and Jay-Z as an extension were more contemporary. And because when I kind of came of age, Jay-Z was already something of a legacy act, and I guess you could say if there was it was almost like he was seen as like the predecessor to Kanye West by the time, of 2010, 2011. That's around the time they were collaborating upon albums, and Kanye was, in a sense, the bigger draw. Jay-Z was just known as almost music royalty. His wife was more famous at that point, by the time I was in high school, for example. Anyway, but let's read out these perspectives. From Waista, December 2002, the first rap album that I've fallen head over heels for. This is a good album. Going back to this, I'm incredibly impressed with how slick and modern the production still sounds, but it also reminds one of that cozy, interesting early 21st century consensus period. Fun stuff. Godson 14, May 2003. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's official. With his fifth album, aptly titled The Blueprint, Jay-Z has crowned himself the king of rap music. Laying a foundation for other MCs to follow, H.O.V.A presents a lyrical masterpiece. And to make matters worse, for the competition that is, he does so over a selection of the tightest beats, Just Blaze, Timbaland, to come by hip-hop since fellow Brooklynite and notorious B.I.G. changed the game. Jay-Z sets it off with a clear and concise statement of his purpose. The rule is back. From then on, each track dares rappers who tried to test his skills to answer back this time. There's also the cleverly worded sort of a love song, Girls, 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 where Jay calls out every type of woman in the book. He limits the guest appearances to just one when he collaborates with Eminem for Renagade. As always, classic material proves why Jay-Z retained his iconic status in the hip-hop world. I think part of the reason I think Jay-Z has been diminished in some people's eyes as a recording artist, the acclaim diminished a bit. I think some people have this narrative now that, it was all just Kanye's production. I don't think it's clearly not all that. That has something to do with it. There are many great rappers which wouldn't have been as interesting without their producers. They'll be the first to admit that. That isn't to take away from how skilled they were as an artist all the same. We're not going to call Jigga That N not so great because if DJ Premier wasn't there, and Heroes for Hire is just, I like Heroes for Hire. You just gotta, that one track aside, Heroes for Hire is good stuff. Well, I can understand people feeling as though it wasn't as socially conscious or aware consistently as the previous two albums, but there's a few tracks on there that certainly were. Anyway, that's a diatribe for a video I've already uploaded. Excuse that. Robin Carmody, November 2003. The first half of this album is utterly fucking awesome, lacerating endless anti-socialism, and as such the embodiment of American music, on at least one level. Well, benefits from being full-on Jay-Z, and most importantly, no sign of Lenny fucking Kravitz or homages to Frank fucking Sinatra. The infamous December 2003. Jay-Z is number one rapper of all time. I don't think nobody really has anything on him. It just hurts to see him retire. I think Blueprint is Jay-Z's best overall album, straight up a real classic. Dying Atheist, June 2004. This album was possibly my favourite hip-hop album when I listened to hip-hop, even though now I still enjoy the odd listen. Your Blues, August 2004. Jay-Z might not be the best rapper out there, but he convinces you he is. His voice and flow are probably the best in rap, comparable to Chuck D in his prime in the late Tupac. His rhymes are nowhere near as good though. On Takeover, he says Nas has a one good album every 10-year average. Jay-Z's rhyme success rate is about the same. 1 out of every 10 of them is a killer. For instance, the one I just mentioned. Jay-Z is also helped out by stunning production work, which is aided by access to great samples. He makes enough money to sample the Jackson 5, The Doors, and Al Green. Izzo is the obvious highlight. Like many CDs, it is a bit long and starts to get tiring by the time you get to Renegade with Eminem, but a highly recommended rap album that is comparable to watching The Godfather or something. High praise there. Francis Ford Coppola. There you go. JT 123456789 Classic H to the Izzo. I would consider this to be the CD that really proves that Jay-Z is the greatest rapper alive, and it really isn't his best. Lots of great tracks, highly recommended. I'd be of the opinion that this or the 2003 Black Album was Jay-Z's finest, though a couple of those 2010s releases were very good too. I'd have to listen to them more so though. Anyway, that review is from October 2004, as is this one from Lai, L-A-I. I wrote a review of this album about 2 years ago now, Reading it back on another site, I don't think I've ever talked so much shit in my life. The basic premise of the review was a confused ramble about why Jay-Z, and this album especially, has crossed over so massively when he doesn't have any obvious rock traits going for him, like Eminem's grungy nihilistic introspection, De La Soul's indie attitude, Public Enemy's punk credentials, The Roots' de facto status as an actual rock band, etc. Here's the obvious reason. This is a brilliant album. I didn't realize that at the time giving it a free, but I was being an idiot, rejecting the album more than I should have because of Jay-Z's perceived lack of credibility, because I preferred his arch-rival Nas, and still do, because I didn't like any other Jay-Z albums, and still don't, and because of the fact that Girls, Girls, Girls really is an absolutely atrocious song. Well, I grew up and I can tell you, in full honesty, with lack of pretense, the blueprint is excellent. The Rule Is Back kicks things off in a reasonably epic manner. This kind of regal production ruined the Black Album, but it's used sparingly here and it's very effective. Takeover, despite being surpassed by Nas' response, Eva, is still a great diss song. Izzo, H.O.V.A, is about as brilliant as mainstream rap singles get, and the same would be true of the utterly fantastic Heart of the City Ain't No Love if they'd released it, which they should have in the place of Girls, Girls, Girls. The Dark Renagade is also a highlight, boasting as it does an immense Eminem guest appearance. In all seriousness, the second verse Eminem spits may be his finest ever appearance on record for sheer rapping ability. Jigga That N word, You Don't Know, Never Change, and Song Cry are just light years ahead of the typical songs that pad out most rap releases, and what pads out every other Jay-Z album too. Even the bonus tracks, stuffed after Blueprint, Momma Loves Me, are pretty damn good. All in all, the Blueprint is a joy to listen to, and it can genuinely be considered one of the best rap albums of the 21st century. Let's keep going to Lonely_Panda, February 2005. After 4 albums of hit and miss tracks, and he hits on Nas for doing the same, he busts out with a worthy successor to Reasonable Doubt. If you heard that 1996 classic, then you know how bold and unlikely those words are. Immediately as you start the CD, you notice 3 things. 1, the cover is the first classic cover since Reasonable Doubt. 2, first album for him to be smoking a cigar since Reasonable Doubt. 3, first album to have that laid-back vibe since Reasonable Doubt. Ain't that some shit? There just ain't no stopping this CD as you go from track to track. The Rule Is Back is a classic opener, and Takeover is a classic. I Don't Know hated a track. Izzo H.O.V.A is a pop classic that introduces the only man that was worthy of taking Jigga Man's place, Kanye West. And if that wasn't enough, Kanye comes back with one of the best beats of the 21st century, track later with Girls, 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 and then ups it once more, Song Cry. Throughout the whole album, Jay's at the top of his game as he raps about, well, what else? Him being at the top of the game. Although there's a couple of missteps, I can see Jay-Z shaking his head in regret of the laughable "Pass me the Jigga" chorus of Jigga That N word, but for every "Pass me the Jigga" there is a "I sell ice in the winter, I sell fire in hell." And for every Jigga That N word, there are 12 tracks that are the highlight of his career, and for a CD with only 13 tracks, you get the point. The Blueprint shows a man looking back to his accomplishments and losses with more energy and soul than any rapper before or after. For a man so obsessed with his past and his legend, he seems to be trying pretty hard to make sure we don't forget him. With an album as good as this, you'd better be dying from a tumor to forget him. While it's inevitable that he will be forgotten decades later, it's also inevitable that whoever is playing him will wonder just who he was. DNNGRVS, February 2005. Running this rap shit are some of the confident words that Jay-Z proclaims on this album. The thing about it is when he was saying it, he was right. There was no rapper at the time as hot as Jay-Z. The beats were so well constructed, and Jay-Z rapped with such a laid-back bravado, it seems that it was effortless to him. The song Takeover was a diss track towards Nas and Mobb Deep. That track especially came at Nas. In fact, Jay-Z said, one was the other was Illmatic. Now that's a one-hot album, every 10-year average. All this was due to the fact that besides Nas and Jay-Z's obvious beef, Jay-Z was stating that Nas hasn't made an album near the brilliance of Illmatic. Nas came back hard with Eva and balanced himself out with Takeover. The next song, Izzo, H.O.V.A, which samples the Jackson 5's I Want You Back, is one of the less resonant tracks, but it's one of the best for sure. And Girls, 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 which features great guest vocal appearances by Biz Markie, Q-Tip, and the legendary Slick Rick, has Jay-Z showing his love for just about every type of woman. But those 3 aren't the only great tracks. Others include Song Cry, Hola Hovito, Heart of the City, Ain't No Love, and finally the acclaimed Renagade featuring Eminem, which honestly Eminem gave one of the best and most memorable verses of his career. And if this album has any low points, which seems merely impossible, it's that Eminem overshadowed Jay-Z on Renegade, but Jay-Z rose and kept rising afterwards. This album further certifies Jay-Z's place at the top of the rap game, especially in the 2000s. H.O.V.A, February 2005. Holy crap, I don't believe it. Jay-Z has released a decent album, but not because of the MCing, but because of the production, which clearly takes the front seat while lyrics take the back seat. Besides Never Change, Blueprint, and Izzo, the album is actually quite nice. Jeuron, that's Jeuron, March 2005. Wow, where do I begin? I can honestly say that this is the only album where just about every track is near enjoyable and lyrically excellent. The opener was the best that I have ever heard on a rap album, with the exception of the one on Rock La Familia. Takeover was the best diss song I've ever heard, and it definitely outshines Nas's Eva as being more lyrically correct and accurate. Izzo's Song Cry, Never Change, Ain't No Love, You Don't Know, Renagade, Girls, Girls, and Blueprint were superb. The only tracks that I didn't care for were Jigga and Hola Hovito. This whole album is a modern hip-hop classic, and it set the trend for the soul craze that is so evident in today's hip-hop music. This was Jay-Z's most lyrically complex and introspective album next to Reasonable Doubt. If there was any doubt about who is the best MC alive today and the true king of New York, then this album should silence all of those critics. Easily one of the best albums of all time and way better than anything that Nas has ever put out. How you like that, Crystal Pickett? I don't know if it's better than Illmatic, but okay, that's quite a claim. Joe wrote 628, May 2005. After a week opening The Rule Is Back, Jay-Z comes through with a brilliant, aggressive diss track produced by Kanye West, Takeover, which, along with Nas Eva, completes one of the greatest sets of diss tracks in hip-hop history between two of the greatest MCs at the top of their games. Throughout the album, Jay is on point lyrically, and his beats provided by West, Just Blaze, and Timbaland, among others, are as strong as they've ever been. Girls, 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 featuring Slick Rick, Biz Markie, and Q-Tip, is perhaps the Blueprint's best album, I think he means track, lyrically even eclipsing Takeover due to its slick, laid-back delivery and cleverness. Renegade is perhaps Jay's weakest moment on the album, not because the song is poor, it's excellently produced by Eminem, and Jay's actually quite good on it, but he's clearly outshined by Eminem for the duration of the song. The album doesn't get tiring, and as its quality has held up over time, a landmark hip-hop album. While it may not be Jay-Z's best album, Reasonable Doubt, I prefer this to Reasonable Doubt, to be frank. It is the one which established him as the top rapper of the moment among mainstream media and casual hip-hop fans. It established him as a superstar and cemented his legacy. Rock_A_Fella7, June 2005. The Blueprint is Jay-Z's crowning achievement, a flawless album that can carried in the same breath as Reasonable Doubt. This is one of the most cohesive albums in years, and every one of the tracks show it here. Tracks like Takeover, Izzo, H.O.V.A, and Renegades show Jay-Z's range, while songs like Song Cry, Heart of the City, Ain't No Love show Jay-Z at his most introspective and most regretful. The only falter on this album would be that N-word Jigga with its pop sound, provided courtesy of the track masters, does not fit in with the rest of the sound on the album. Take that away and you have one of the best, if not the best, album of this young century. And a couple more from 2005. A few more, actually. Firstly, B_Don, August 2005. Okay, let me first say, this is, along with Chronic 2001, this is the best produced hip-hop album ever. I think a retarded monkey, Mike Jones, could have rapped over this album and gotten 4 stars. With that said, this is one of the top 5 greatest CDs of all time. Jay's constant big biting is minimal despite barely writing The Rule Is Back between Biggie and Slick Rick, which is still a solid intro. From start to finish, this is a classic album. Kanye and Just Blaze provide the album's backbone as Jay effortlessly but rips their soulful samples. Takeover, though not as good as Ether, is still a classic diss track. You Don't Know is a smart interlude that breaks down Jay's financial moves at the time. Heart of the City is arguably the best. Should have been a single song ever with the forgotten All I Need. Features Jay's lyricism making up for the next track, Renegade, which Eminem clearly outshines Jay, though he needed one of the greatest verses of all time to do so. Add Never Change, Song Cry, and Blueprint, all in which Jigga provides an introspective view of his life, and you have what rap should be good, even with the skippable that N-word Jigga. Darts in August 2005. I used to not like Jay-Z, but he is growing on me a bit. That said, this is a good album. Some people say it's his best, but I still think Reasonable Doubt is better. Favorite tracks are Never Change, Hola Hovito, and Izzo, H.O.V.A. Ill Kid, November 2005. Who knew had card up his sleeve? Diss not only Mobb Deep, but the streets proclaimed King of New York, Nas. Now, I'm not sure if this album should have received 5 mics in the source, but it's a CD that I keep in my stereo. MFHJ, November 2005. I like this album, but it does not display his best lyrics, even though he drops some nice punchlines. I'm killing him out here, they needin' first aid, because the boys got more 6s than first grade, among others. Decent album. Trackmaster, December 2005. Why do people consider Jay as one of the best rappers of all time? All he does is rip. Other rappers' lines. The takeover was a mistake. This was a blessing in disguise for Nas. He recreated his career. Kanye does hold it down on H to the Izzo. Girls, Girls, Girls is a brag track by a rapper who only gets women because he has a ton of money. Jigga That N has a tight beat, but the lyrics are whack. The only great song on the album is the misspelled Renagade, featuring my favorite white boy Eminem. Steve, December 25th, 2005. This will be the last one we read out. An instant classic. With this one album, Jay-Z took New York City, humiliated Nas, and convinced Mobb Deep to sell out. His flow is unbelievable, and on Renegade, both him and Eminem contribute some of the best verses of their respective careers. His clever wordplay illuminates his life clearly in just one album. Heart of the City, All I Need, Song Cry, Jigga That N, Rule is Back, uses Biggie's lyrics to represent the fact that he is now king after Biggie's death, and Girls, Girls, Girls are all classic hip-hop tracks. Takeover defeated both Nas and Mobb Deep in one swipe. Nas' retaliation, Eva, is overdone and forced. Also has some unbelievably dumb burns. Gay-Z, come on Nas, that's just stupid, and ends up just sounding resentful and bitter. And if you doubt that Jay was the victor, look at the outcome. Nas is fading into obscurity, and Jay-Z is one of the most famous, important figures in the rap world. In fact, when the beef was squashed, Nas stood before Jay-Z and came up at his call, seeming like he had surrendered. Interesting take. Nowadays, Nas is releasing some very critically acclaimed albums, and is possibly just due to the quantity of individuals praising him and listening to his music on the internet, is more popular than ever. I wonder how we feel about Jay-Z now. He'll always be a certain music royalty, although I wonder if Kanye West overshadowed him at some point, although Kanye West is now fading into a certain corner of a more obscure internet world, let's say. In any case, do give The Blueprint another listen if you want to remember what the very early 2000s had sounded like, because again, my friends, have the best possible day, night you can ever imagine. If you want to make that a possibility, try The Blueprint again. Maybe the ingredient to a really, really happy day. Thanks again.